Jared Dillian. Own your money, own your life.
I'm Jared Dillian. This is the Jared Dillian Show. Welcome. If you want to call to talk about your money, please call 844-305-7800. That's 844-305-7800. This is the Jared Dillian Show. You can also go to my website, which is jareddillianmoney.com. You'll find a bunch of cool stuff there. You'll find old shows that you can listen to, and you can also get the Bond Master Class, which is a class on bonds which you probably desperately need. And you can follow me on Twitter at DailyDirtNap. We were just talking about taxes. There's a lot of discussion about inequality nowadays. And objectively, if you were to measure inequality, if you were to look at top incomes and bottom incomes, they've exploded. Absolutely exploded. Does that bother you? It bothers a lot of people. It doesn't really bother me. There's a bunch of root causes to it, but that's not really what we're going to be talking about here. But a lot of people want a solution to the inequality because it offends them that there are some really, really rich people and there are lots of poor people, and this bothers them. So they want some kind of solution to the inequality. So most people are dumb, and this is true. Most people are really, really dumb, and they don't think about smart ways to do things. They think about dumb ways to do things. And the dumb way to fix this is to take the money from the rich people and give it to the poor people. That is the dumb way to do it. That is the dumb way to do it. That is what you call first order thinking. Let's just take the money from over here and give it to the people over here, and now everything is fixed. Everything is fixed. But that doesn't really fix the problem, does it? I mean, that's the whole saying about, give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime. So instead of giving a man a fish, why don't we teach a man to fish? Let me give you a tip. It's a lot harder to tackle inequality after the fact, after it's already happened. Once you have somebody that has $50 billion, it's hard to just go take that person's money. It's much easier to tackle it before the fact. So let me talk about myself like I like to do. I have had in my life some of the best education that you can possibly imagine. And it began actually when I was a toddler. When I was not even a toddler, like an infant, but a toddler. So I was in Alaska. I was in Kodiak, Alaska. My dad was a pilot for the Coast Guard, and my mom was a housewife. And since it was there was snow, there was lots of snow and rain, and lots of darkness. We spent a lot of time in that house learning things. And I was a baby. I was literally a baby. I was 1 year old, and my mom would sit with me at the refrigerator, and she had these magnetic letters, and she would spell out things on the refrigerator. She would spell out C-A-T, and she would say C-A-T, cat. And I was a baby, and she might as well have been talking to herself. And then she would spell D-O-G, dog, and say dog. And little did she know that I was actually paying attention. I was a baby. So when I was 22 months old, not even 2 years old, I began to read. And I actually started to read books. I read children's books. I started to read the Sally, Dick, and Jane books and stuff like that. And I was a 2-year-old, and I was reading books, which is prodigious. And it's because my mom didn't have a lot to do, and I didn't have a lot to do, and we were in Alaska, and it was dark, and we just did that stuff. And that gave me such an advantage that's lasted for the rest of my life. I mean, to make that kind of investment in a child. And I tell my friends this with kids. I say, you should do this. And of course, a lot of times both parents work. But even if one doesn't, I say, do this. Sit by the refrigerator with the letters. It's amazing what a child's brain can soak up. Anyway, so, I was a 2-year-old. I was reading. And then we moved to Florida, and at 3 years old, I get into a pre-K program, which was a private school, and I don't know if it was a gifted school, but it was a private school. And I got some attention there. And then we moved to New York City, And I ended up going to Grace Church School. And Grace Church School, to this day, is still one of the most prestigious private schools in New York. And at Grace Church School, I had individualized attention. I was allowed to go ahead of my classmates in reading. I was allowed to go ahead of my classmates in math. I was, in kindergarten and first grade, I was reading at a 4th to 6th grade level, doing math at a 4th to 6th grade level. And I had individual attention all the time. I always had somebody with me. And my brain was a sponge, and I soaked up as much as I possibly could. Now, my parents got divorced. I moved to Connecticut. And, there was no way I was getting that kind of attention in Connecticut in a public school. But guess what? Public schools in Connecticut are still pretty good. They're still pretty good. And they're very good, in fact. And I thrived in schools there. And I ended up going to one of the best high schools in the country. There's a private public hybrid school in my town. And it's really good at English and humanities and art and music. And I went to that school. And I got, some of the best possible education that I could get. Now, I could actually have gotten better education. There's schools in New York. There's a school called Hunter College High School, which is probably the best school in the country. And if I had stayed in New York, I probably would have ended up there. But, I got some really, really good education. Now, imagine, instead of being born where I was born, and having the experiences that I had. Imagine that I was born in a place like Mullins, South Carolina. And my education consisted of a teacher wheeling in a TV cart and watching TV all day and having no hope. That is, South Carolina, the education is terrible here. And it's terrible in a lot of places in the country. There's a lot of places in the country, especially in South Carolina, where if you were born there, you are doomed from the start. You are doomed. It's almost a death sentence. There is no hope for you. There's absolutely none. By the way, I don't know if you remember the Space Shuttle Challenger. Of course you do. Space Shuttle Challenger, there was an astronaut in the Space Shuttle Challenger named Ronald McNair. And Ronald McNair was from a town in South Carolina called Lake City. And Lake City is, as far as rural South Carolina towns go, is actually okay. But he was born in 1950, and he graduated from high school in 1968, right during the Civil Rights Movement. He grew up in the Jim Crow South in Lake City, South Carolina. And he educated himself by going to the library frequently, and he ended up going to MIT to get his PhD in aeronautical engineering. And he became an astronaut on the Space Shuttle Challenger, and he died. Now, he escaped poverty. He escaped the poor education system that he came from. But that is a 1 in a billion shot. That is a 1 in a billion shot. And the reality is that some people win the geographic lottery and some people lose the geographic lottery. And I won the geographic lottery. And I had some other advantages. And some people lose the geographic lottery. And one of the weird things about the United States, and I don't know if this is true of other countries or not, but education should be great, and it often isn't. But the interesting thing is that education varies depending on where you go in the country. And even within states or counties, everybody knows where the good schools are, and people try to live in the good school districts. And this, the whole idea that your education is based on your geography seems to be very unfair to me. It's not a very capitalist thing to do. It's not a free market in education. And a lot of times what you see is that when people want to move into these school districts, the property taxes are higher and property values are higher. So, education should be great everywhere, and it's not. So why not? And there's a bunch of reasons, and part of it is money. And education, by the way, and I'm supposed to be the right-wing guy, right? I'm like the conservative or a libertarian or whatever. Education is one of these things that actually will get better if you throw money at it. There's very few problems in this world where if you throw money at it, it'll get better. Just the act of throwing money at this will make it better. A teacher's salary here in a lot of parts of the state is $29,000 a year. And that is ridiculous. And if you offer somebody $29,000 a year, you are not going to attract good people if you do that. $29,000 a year is not enough. Now, in some parts of the country, teachers are adequately paid, but in a lot of parts of the country, they're underpaid. And we've seen a little pushback on that. And I know all about the unions and incentives and stuff like that. And except for a few places in the country, maybe like New Jersey and Connecticut, teacher pay needs to be higher. So back to inequality. If you really, really, really wanted to fix inequality in this country, if you really wanted to fix it, you would fix education first. You would fix education. That is the long-term solution. The short-term solution is just to pass a wealth tax and just do a grab of money and maybe redistribute it. I don't know. Maybe the government keeps it. Like, that's not a good solution. And it pisses a lot of people off. The solution, the long-term solution to inequality is education. And a lot of liberals do not want to hear that because what they really want is retribution against wealthy people that have somehow wronged them or something. All this tax stuff is about retribution, and it doesn't fix the problem at all. In fact, it makes inequality worse because high income taxes ensure that people don't get rich and that the people who already are rich stay rich. And if I were president, I personally would be paying a lot of attention to education. I'm Jared Dillian. This is the Jared Dillian Show.
The Jared Dillian Show.